Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Tyler Seaman. I am a video editor. I work in Davinci Resolve and Blender and a whole host of different programs. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make this fiery text right here. It's nice and warm on my face. This is going to be done completely in Davinci Resolve, and it's going to be completely procedural. So that means that it will adapt to whatever text you want to use. You don't have to update any settings. We set it up, you type what you want, it's ready to go. And that's all you can hope for, I guess. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. So let's get started. Also, I know we said we'd get started, but before I forget, if this is too much info and it's too in the weeds for you, I am selling this on my Gumroad for like a couple bucks. So if you just want to grab this for yourself, grab the setting file, just head over to Gumroad, pay like $2 or something like that, and it's yours. So you can use it whenever you want. And just because I like y'all, the first 5 people to use this discount code right here will get it for free. So there you go. All right, so here we are in Davinci Resolve. I've got a new composition open. This is a 4K composition, 30 FPS. Like I mentioned in the intro, this is completely procedural, so the dimensions and the FPS that you use when you make this procedural effect, it doesn't really matter because it's procedural and it will adapt to your project, as far as I know. So you can see right here, I'll let it play. It's a fiery text, boom, and that's what we're gonna go for. I've got nothing but a background image up in the media pool. This is going to be used for a different effect later, and we'll get into that. So anyways, we're going to take this fusion comp and move it out of the way because we don't want it anymore. And we're going to open or drag in a new fusion composition right here, completely blank, nothing in it. That's what we want. We're not going to be messing around in the media, or I'm sorry, in the edit page very much. So we're just going to hop straight over to Fusion. So we've got a media out node right here. That's fine. We are going to drag in a background node. That's up here. You can also type shift space and type in background, or you could just type in BG up here just for like a quick type. And so yeah, anyways, background node, and we're going to connect it into the output of the media out node, or I guess that's the input. Background input. Yeah, input. So yeah, black background, that's what we got. And we're going to turn this all the way down, the alpha, to 0 to make it transparent. This isn't necessary, but that's just how I prefer to work. So yeah, transparent is the way I like to work. Long story short. So I'd like to see the bounds that I'm working within, so I zoom out a bit, and I'm going to put it into single viewer mode just for now. So first things first, we are going to add in our text. So the text node, text plus node, is right up here. So you can drag it down, you can shift space and type it if you want, but you know, we got a couple options up here. Use them if you got them. So here's our text plus node, and I'm going to rename it. So hit F2, and I'm going to type in fiery text, and it will autocomplete right here. And then we're going to merge this by grabbing the output and dragging it to the output of the background node, and that will create a merge. So this will merge the text over our transparent background. We don't have anything up here because we haven't typed our text yet, so click on the fiery text. Come over to the text field in the inspector and type in what you want. I'm going to type in fiery, well, that's not right, fiery text. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go all caps. My typing skills are failing me today. Okay, so fiery text. We're gonna choose whatever font you want. I like using NextArt. That's my favorite. We are going to increase the size just to our taste. So I think that's pretty good, right about there. And so that's pretty much all we're going to be doing here in the text tab of the text node. So now we're going to move over to the shading node, or shading tab of the node rather. Ugh, words are hard. So what we want to do is we want to come over, we've already got our first element selected, and that's the one we want. We want to come down here to the properties type. We're going to change the type from solid to gradient. And that's going to give us a nice looking little gradient here. But there's a problem. This is backwards. We want the white of the gradient to be at the bottom because the source of heat is always the brightest. So if you take a look at a picture of like flames or something like that, the closest to the burning, like the wood, is usually always the brightest part of the flame. So we're gonna invert the gradient handles right here. So we're just gonna take the black, bring it over here, and we're gonna take the white and switch it all the way over here. And that's actually looking pretty good. I think we're gonna actually pump it back just punch the black back just a little bit like that. Yeah, that's pretty good, I think. Okay, so that's where we're headed with that. Next, we want to come up to our shading elements and click on our second shading element. It's called red outline, and we're going to enable that. So we get this red outline around the text. We don't want it red. We want to change it to something else. We're going to come down here into the properties, to the type, change it to gradient, just like we did with our fill. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to switch the handles so that the white is at the bottom. So you don't want to leave the gradient to be completely glaringly obvious. Like, yeah, that's kind of obvious. But the problem with that is the problem we're seeing rather is that the thickness is a little bit too high. So I'm going to drop the thickness down like about 1.47. I think that looks okay. All right. So we've got our gradient set up, and I think that's pretty much all we're going to be doing here. So, okay. Next up, we're going to click on our text node over here. We're going to hit shift space, and we're going to type in CC for a color corrector node. So with this color corrector node selected, we're going to come over to our range wheel, and we're going to boost it as far as we can over to the mid orange/red section, leaning more towards orange. That looks pretty good, I think. It's a little saturated, so I'm going to drop the gain just a tiny bit, and that's okay. And it doesn't look exactly like fire yet, but that's all right. It's a process. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I am going to take a break and have a sip of tea. Honey chamomile. It's good stuff. Okay, so we've got our gradient set up, and we've got our you know what? Actually, I'm going to come back into the text, and I'm going to boost the fill gradient just a little bit and make it a little more white, and that looks pretty good. You can come back and adjust any of these settings. If it doesn't look right to you, this is the way I like it. But again, it's to your taste. So, anyways, we've got our color set up, and we've got our gradient set up. Now we want to give it some movement and make it flicker, like flame kind of. And we're going to be doing that with a displace node. So make sure you have your color corrector node selected. Shift space, displace. I've still got caps lock on, but that's all right. Or just DSP for short. Click add. We've got our displace node added to the hierarchy. You can wiggle around to make sure it's connected. But you notice it didn't do anything. Well, that's because there is no data going into the displace node telling it how to displace this text. And we're going to do that with a fast noise node. And that's background. Fast noise is right up here. So grab it and drag it down. And we're going to do some more changes to the displace later, but it doesn't make sense when we can't see the results. So anyways, in this fast noise node, I'm going to bring up our dual viewer. And I'm going to click on fast noise. I'm going to push 1 and bring it up in the first viewer. So the noise is basically just like a smoky pattern of pure black and white values, and just a gradient that has like some chaos to it. It's kind of muddled, so you can't really see, it's more gray than anything. It's got some white, but not very dark. That's okay. We are gonna take the scale of our fast noise and bring it up just a bit. I think I brought it up to like something like 9. Yeah, 9. That looks pretty good. And we're going to bring the detail up as well, because we want the detail, as you'll see when we change it, it gives more of a smoky pattern, and that's fine. Like, we don't want to go too terribly high. Like, we don't want to max it out because then it kind of looks like sand. Well, I guess not, but But that's okay because I haven't changed the contrast yet. So I'm going to bump the contrast up just a little tiny bit just to make some distinction between the blacks and the whites. So that's going to put me on a list somewhere. But anyways, it makes the blacks darker and it makes the whites brighter. And that's how it's using the Luma channel basically. And the Luma channel goes by values of light and, 0 being pure black, 1 being pure white. 1 will give the most effect and 0 will give no effect. So anyways, enough of that. I'm going to drag the fast noise into the foreground of the displace and watch what happens to the text. Boom. It makes it look all weird and wobbly and warbly. And that's what we want. Although it's a little bit strong. And this is what I was talking about when I said we had to change some displace node settings. We're going to come back into our displace node and we're going to come to the type and we're going to type in XY. Radial is a 3-dimensional movement, so it simulates the X, it simulates the Y, and then it also simulates the Z, which is like forward and backwards, like to this camera is would be Z direction. And we really only want bidirectionality, so like X and Y is like sideways and up and down. But as you can see, when we changed it from radial to XY, it pretty much just made it back to normal. That's okay because we have all of our settings here are stuck at 0. So flame and heat move in a vertical fashion. So that means that the Y refraction is going to be a little bit stronger than the X. So the X, we're going to control click and bring it up to maybe about, I think like 47 is where I had it last. Not too terribly strong. And then, the Y refraction, I'm going to bump it up to about 0.009. And I'm making sure I don't go crazy with my wobbly hands. So anyways, that gives it some jitter. And you can tell, it's not completely straight. That's all well and good. But you'll notice that once we hit the space bar, nothing happens. Our playhead moves, but the text doesn't move. So that is because we haven't told the fast noise node to simulate movement, and we're going to do that using the seethe. So when we change the seethe here with this little turn dial here, watch what happens. It changes basically the overall appearance of the fast noise, and it makes our text warble. Our text changes with it. But we don't want to keyframe this and just change it constantly because that's a lot of work, and then we want it basically to be just drop in, type, and go. So we're going to use an expression to simulate movement. Just a quick note, expressions are super powerful, but they're also super in-depth. So if you want to learn more about expressions, I suggest going to check out Patrick Sterling, Jake Whip. I know Casey Ferris has a couple videos on expressions. Definitely look into them because they're super powerful tools and they're a good thing to know. So anyways, we're going to go back into our fast noise node and we're going to come to the seethe, right click and come down to expression. Now we get a little expression box that pops up and currently it's filled by the value that we chose over here. Now for the expression we're going to be using time. And that will basically cause a change for every frame of time that you have set for your project settings. So basically, as the project dictates, I would be changing the seethe 30 times a second. And that's a lot. That's really fast. Watch. Yeah, see, that is really chaotic, and that is like a little bit too fast. That's a little bit too all over the place. So basically what we want to do is we want to divide the time and slow it down. So I think I had it divided by like time divided by 13 was what I had. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I mean, I got to cache it, but that's okay. Maybe I should change it to smart cache. Let me go up to playback, render cache, user. There we go. So I'm going to let this cache a bit and we'll come back to it. Okay, so since this is procedural, it's kind of CPU heavy. I'm sure there are settings where I can have it changed to my graphics card to run off of, but I don't know that, so I'm just gonna stick with what I got. But yeah, we've got a little bit of fiery flicker here, and that's good. But we're gonna change the color just a little bit to make it more fire-like as well. So come down to the displacement node, shift space, CC, add another color corrector node. In this one, I'm going to just boost midway to the red and oranges of the, or the midway of like orange rather. So like right about here. That's looking pretty fiery. I like that. Okay, so that's looking a little bit fire-like, but what are we missing? It's probably glaringly obvious. We're missing glow. Fire glows. So come down to the color corrector, select it, shift space, and we're just going to type in glow. Kaboom. So now I've got, it gives the text a little bit of glow, and we're going to boost the glow size to probably, maybe not that much. We're going to drop it to about, make about 13.7. Give it a size of 13.7. And we're going to boost the actual glow itself up to about 84.9. That's cool. Yeah, that looks pretty good. But then we're also going to take the blend and we're going to bump it up to about 37. And that makes it pretty darn bright. So what we want to do, just to give it a little extra touch, a little bit of extra oomph, is we're going to reach into the fast noises output and port it over to the mask input of the glow. And that is going to make the glow follow the flicker of the displace as well as, or as dictated by the fast noise, I should say. So when we play this, it's probably going to be a little bit jank. Okay, so I let it cache for up to about 60 frames. There's a couple seconds, but so that's where we're at right now. That's looking pretty good. So if you wanted, you could stop right here and you could have your fiery flickering text, and that's all fine and good. But why not push it just a little bit farther and give it a little bit of a heavier effect? And I'm talking about adding some heat waves that come out from the back of the text. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to highlight this node tree here, and we're going to push it all the way down to the end here. And we're going to bring in our background image. So something to be wary of when you bring up say you bring up this background image in the first viewer, pay attention to the size. This size is a bit bigger than the composition that we want. But that's okay, because we're just going to bring it down here and we're going to merge it over this background. And the source data from the background is what will dictate the actual resolution of the image. So we just hit that, hit a merge over that, and we'll see right here that it adapts to the 4K resolution rather than the 5000 by 3337 resolution. Anyways, all that aside, we are gonna start making our heat waves. So first things first, we're gonna bring in another fast noise node. Now the thing about the heat waves is they're not as chaotic, and they're a bit scaled up from heat flicker, from like flames. Basically what I'm trying to say is heat waves expand. So they're bigger than the flame, and when they expand, that means that their movement gets to be less chaotic. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So in our fast noise node, we're going to bump up the scale, and we're going to bump it up to about 5, and that's a bit bigger than the flame's flicker. And you'll see what I'm talking about once we get the effect all squared away. We're going to leave the detail as it is because it's just heat wave, it's distortion, and it doesn't really have any type of texture to it. But we will bump the contrast up to about 2, just over 2, like that. That's pretty good. So now with that all squared away, we're going to add in another displace node. So make sure you have your fast noise selected, shift space, displace. Oh, there it is. Okay. So in this displace node, we're going to leave it as radial. A three-dimensional movement for heat waves makes sense. Makes more sense than chaotic 2D movement like with flames. So leave it as radial, and we're going to just adjust a few settings to taste. So we're going to leave the refraction strength as it is. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure just the default settings worked. So we're just going to leave it as default for right now. So what we're going to do is, this is important. Make sure that the fast noise is connected to the foreground of the displace node, because we need a background image that will be the affected Okay, so the fast noise will be the effector, and we need something from the background to be the effectee. So I'm going to pull from this merge up to the background input of the displace node, and try and stay with me on this. I'm going to merge back over itself so we can actually see. I'm going to put this up in the first viewer. Okay, and I'm going to change the color of this node to something like purple. And the reason I'm doing that is because this node is going to become an extraneous node whenever we go to set the macro. This is going to be my reminder to delete this later on. But it serves our purpose for viewing it for right now. So now we've got our display set up. I'm actually going to pass through this, so it just to save some CPU. But anyways, we've got this set up, so once we go ahead and play, nothing's happening. Why is that? Well, it's because we have not animated the seethe yet. So I'm gonna bring this up in our second viewer. I'm gonna bring our fast noise up in our first viewer, and I'm gonna change the seethe. And you'll see warble, 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 and that's what we want. So how do we do that? Well, expression. So right click on seethe, and we're going to click expression, and we're going to use the same time expression that we used for the flicker. So time, but heat waves are a lot slower than flame, so we're going to have it cranked down to about divided by 65 maybe. 65 is pretty much where I left it off. Okay, so I've cached about 60 seconds of it. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got our warble effect, but it's not quite flame-like yet, and we're going to go over how to make it a little bit more flame-like right now. So we're going to grab our fast noise node, and we're going to pull it off to the side here, and we're going to add in another background node. We'll put it right here, and we'll push this into viewer 1. Now, it's just a plain black background, and that's not what we want. We want a gradient. So fire and heat move in a vertical fashion, so we want to adjust these handles so that the gradient is up and down, and we actually want the black at the bottom this time, and I'll go over why that is in a second. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create like an area of effect, basically, to where that warble actually appears. Now, at the base of a flame, there's not much warble because that is basically the I can't remember the scientific term. I think that's the exothermic point where the heat is being dispersed from, and it's coming out so fast that the human eye doesn't perceive it. And only when it reaches cooler air and slows down a bit, that's when it starts to make that warble effect, and that's how we can pick it up. So basically what I'm trying to say is the source of the heat doesn't have perceptible warble, but once it gets up to the cooler parts of the flame with the warble, that's when we start to see it with our human eyes, and that's what we're trying to simulate here. So we're going to grab this handle, and we're going to pull it up just a bit like that, and we're probably going to have to come back and adjust this later on, just depending on where we land in the composition, but right about there seems to be good. And we're going to take this and we're going to merge it over our fast noise right here. So you'll see that once we pull this up in our first viewer, it's just the gradient. What's going on? Something's broken. We broke it. It's ruined. Delete the video. Thumbs down. No, please don't do that. Here, I can fix this. Promise. Whoops. Nope, we don't want to right click. Come to our merge node right here between the background and the fast noise, and we're just going to change the apply mode to multiply. And you'll see that down here, the warble is happening in the white portion of the gradient, and that's our area of effect, and that's what we want. So, as we scrub through and we view this, you'll probably notice something, maybe not, but that's why I'm here, something weird about the warble. What is the problem with this warble? You probably bang your head against the wall, because I know I did for a while. It's not moving. Like, it's shifting and it's morphing, but it's not actually moving. So how do we get this warble to move? Well, you probably guessed it. We're going to use an expression. So come into our fast noise node right here, and we're going to come over to the center. So right click center, and hit expression. Now, the expression is only going to affect the point that we change in this this value here. So this is the X value and this is the Y value. Since heat flows in a vertical fashion, we're going to change the Y value. Oh, we don't want to delete the parenthesis, but so we want the Y value basically to change over time. And that's right. And we're going to have it change by a factor of, like, say 20. And that's where we're going to leave it at. So now that we've got that expression set up, we'll see the we'll scrub through and we'll see how it affects it. So as it warbles, there's not much warble actually. Well, maybe it's just because it's a little bit too fast, but you can see that the warble is actually moving in a vertical fashion, sort of like heat would be leaving an exothermic reaction. Anyways, there's a lot of scientific terms for basically, it looks cool. So anyways, that's how we do that. Now that's great and all, but we don't want the whole background to be affected, do we? Because, you know, depending upon the size of the text, maybe it takes up the whole screen, maybe it doesn't. But we want it to be as realistic as possible, and we're going to make it realistic with a mask. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to unpass through or reactivate this merge node here, and I'm going to put the media out into our second viewer. So we got our fiery text, we've got our warble. Let's see if it plays nice. Yeah, it's kind of slowed down, but that's okay. We'll fix it. We'll make it work. Don't worry. So the last node in the node tree before the merge is the display. So that's where we're going to place our rectangle mask. So just grab up here. These are our masks. Grab a rectangle mask and run the rectangle mask. Well, okay, actually hold off. We don't need to actually attach it yet, but we can size it. So I'm going to size the rectangle mask like this. Maybe adjust the size just a wee bit. And then I will port the rectangle mask into the displace right there. So, bring the rectangle mask up into your first viewer. You'll see it is an incredibly hard edge. Hard as hard as hard. We don't want that. We're going to bump up the soft edge just to give it a bit of fall off. So I think about 0.04 is where we want it. I think that's pretty good. So once we play this back, we can see there's a bit of warble. Maybe here. I'll let 60 frames cache, and I'll be back with you in a second. While this caches, I'm gonna drink a sip of tea. It's getting cold. All right, so I got about 60 frames cached, and we'll watch right up here. I'll turn off the viewer so you can see. But that looks pretty good. Nice and fiery, nice and warm looking. Boom, fiery text. Woohoo! So we're done with our effects, but we've still got a couple other steps to make this procedural. So what we want to do to make this procedural is we want to tie both the heat wave and the fiery text centers together so that when we move the text, we move the heat wave effect. And we also want the heat wave effect to be dependent upon the size of the text. So it's going to get a little bit in the weeds for this, so just follow along as best as you can. I'll do my best to have text descriptions down at the bottom so that you can follow along. But anyways, let's get into making this procedural. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take all of the, you know what, actually I'm going to organize this a bit. So I selected all of these and I push Shift Space UND to get underlay. And we're going to put a box around all of this so that we can move it like this. But I'm going to Alt click on the underlay and then push F2. And I'm going to rename this text. And then I'm going to I'm going to move the text underlay. It gets kind of hard once you get a big old fat boy flowchart here. But I'm going to Shift click and I'm going to bring this merge over and have the heat effect be the background of this effect, and I'm going to bring this glow in to be the foreground. So once I view this node, say put this in viewer 2, it's the same thing. That's what we're going to be getting when we port it to the media out and send it back to the edit tab. So let's have a talk about how we're going to do this. It wrecked my brain, it wrecked my brain trying to figure this out, and I found out the solution via Bernd Klim. I'm sorry if I messed up your name, but Bernd Klim of VFX Study. So if you have any questions about Davinci Resolve or Fusion, go check out his channel because he's a wealth of information and he's very helpful. I think he's actually a certified instructor too, so go check out his channel. But let me show you what the definition or domain of definition actually does. So just for the sake of showing what this is, I'm going to bring up just the text in the first viewer here, and we're going to right click, come down to region, and show DOD. That's domain of definition. So click that, and you'll see this bounding box. These points here are basically the bottom left point and the top right point of the bounding box. And since it's square, these 2 points basically dictate what amount of pixel data is being used for this composition. So these are points. There's 4, this is X value, Y value, and then this is the X value and the Y value of this point right here. So we're going to be using these points and the width and height of whatever we want, in this case the text, as the driver to fit our heat wave effect to the background of this text. After all that talking, I need another sip of tea. Definitely cold now. So again, we want to tie our heat wave effect to our fiery text using the domain of definition information. So how do we do that? We're going to come into our rectangle right here, and we're going to come over to the inspector, and we're going to pin this little pin icon. Will leave the rectangle's inspector information up. So if we click on another node, the rectangle will still be here at the bottom. So in the rectangle mask, we're going to come down to the center, and we're going to right click and hit expression. So we don't actually have to type anything in this instance. We can just use this little plus sign. This is a pick whip, and we can click and hold, and we want to drag it all the way up to our fiery text. Oh, okay, hold on. Well, okay, before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to Control Z. Make sure that when you have your fiery text node selected, that you're in the correct tab. In this case, we want the not the transform, but we want the layout tab, because that's where the center information is stored. So now that we're in the right tab, we're going to come down and we're going to hit this pick whip, click and drag all the way up until we get to the center, and we're just going to release while hovering over center. So there it enters the you can type this if you want, but it's much easier using the pick whip in my opinion. But the value is that the center of the rectangle will be the center of the fiery text, because this is the identifier and then this is the value. So anyways, with that done, let me go ahead and I'm just gonna I'm gonna view the rectangle mask. That's what I want. Okay, so with that done, I can go to our fiery text and watch. This is our rectangle and this is our fiery text. You can see that the rectangle mask for the heat wave effect is tied to the center of our fiery text. And that's good. That's what we want. So we've got our position locked down, and that's good, but we want to also have the procedural height and width of the heat waves to be adjusted by the text. So this is where it's going to get kind of technical. This may be a little bit too far in the weeds for you if you're a true beginner. So just follow along. I'll have the expression typed out to where you can just copy and paste it if you want. But yeah, so this is what we're going to do now. Okay, so we're going to come into our rectangle mask, and we're going to be adjusting the width. So we will right click and hit expression. And we're going to go ahead and clear this out. Well, no, we'll leave it, just to give it a look, we'll leave it as is right there. So this expression can get a bit crazy, and these text boxes are kind of small, so it's easy to get lost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a notepad to type out the expression so I can just copy and paste it in. So let's give a quick overview of what we want in the expression. So what we want is we want our fiery text to be the driver for how wide and how high this rectangle mask will be. So if you hover over the node that you want, if you look in the bottom left, it will give you the identifier for that node. So fiery text is the node that we want to reference. So that's where we're going to start. And this is a two-part expression, so we're going to start with an open parenthesis. So fiery text dot output, because we're basing this on the output of the fiery text, dot data window. That is basically telling the expression is basically dictating that we're following the domain of definition. So data window and dot. No dot. So what we want is, since we're calculating the width, we are calculating the x value of this domain of definition. It's not this one. I should actually probably bring this up in bring this up in the first viewer. One. Okay. Get that notepad back. So this is the domain of definition that we want to reference. It's our text. So we want both x values because the x plane is side to side. So this is the x value, and then on this side, this is the x value. But what we want to do is we want to subtract the far x value from the near x value. So, you know, since I'm an American, we read things left to right. I think that's pretty much how most of the world does it. If you're not like in Japanese, Asian country. Anyways, so we're going to go from the far to the near. So to give these values a numerical indicator, we go from left to right. So this is number 1. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. So we want this number here to subtract from this number, meaning we want to subtract 3. So we would do open box bracket 3, close box bracket, minus, and then we're just going to copy all this, not the minus sign, copy, paste, and we're going to change this from 3 to, right here, we're going to change it to value 1. That's the first part of the expression. Now the final part of the expression is we want to divide the outcome of this mathematical function by the entire width of the domain of definition. So that, I'm just going to Control V just to paste what I had before, except we are going to delete all that, and we're just going to write width. And let me just double check my notes, make sure I got this right. The output.width, I think we're good. So, copy this expression, Control C, and then make sure you're back in your rectangle mask. Right here, width, we are going to select, Control V, click off, and something's broken. Something's broken. What did I break? For some reason, my divide symbol disappeared. So here, I'm going to leave this up so you can make sure that you've got this, copied exactly right. So I'm going to copy, try again. I'm going to Control A just to be sure, Control V. Boom. Okay, that was the problem. So now you'll see that the rectangle mask via the expression is exactly as wide as our text. And you can test this by going into your fiery text node and, let's say, adjust the size. Watch. You can see the warble is adjusting to how wide the text goes. So Control Z. We're going to come back into our rectangle. So now we want to have a little bit of buffer in between the text and the edge of the rectangle mask. So we are going to go back into our expression, and don't worry, it's not going to get too crazy. We're going to come all the way to the end by width, and we're going to put plus, And we're going to put a small integer at the end. So like, I think I did 0.07. Yeah, that's good. And that gives us a little bit of space in between both sides of the width of the expression. Or of the text, rather, using the expression. Haha, words are hard. Get off my back. Okay, so we have our width taken care of, but now we need to take care of our height. But we've basically done the hard part. So we just right-click on height, go to expression, and we're going to open up our notepad again, and we're going to just copy this entire string. We might, actually, do I already have it copied? I think I do. Yep, I do. And we're just going to adjust the values that we need to change. So, since this is the height, we are no longer focusing on the third and the third integer of the domain of definition. We're going to be focusing on the fourth, which is this. This is height data. And the second, which is this. Also, this point's height data. So so data window 4 minus data window 2. And we're going to change width here to height. Make sure your spelling is right, because I have a problem with that sometimes. So now we're going to select, Control-C, come down to our height, Control-V, enter. And I don't actually know why this is, but the height is a bit skewed. But in this case, that's okay, because that's what we actually want. And like I said before, we want to have a little bit of buffer. So come back down to the height, and since flame and heat is more vertical than horizontal, we're going to have it be a little bit wider than we did for the width. So I'm going to add like 0.09, I think. And you'll see that that's pretty much exactly where we want it. Now I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to adjust the gradient just to make sure. And you can unpin the rectangle now. We don't need it. We don't need it anymore. And I'm going to boost up the black just a little bit to where it lines up kind of in the middle of the text. I think that's pretty good. And so I'm going to go back to our single viewer. I'm going to put this just to make sure I'm watching our media out. And we're going to let it cache and see how it plays. Okay, so I've got this cached to about 60 seconds, and we'll see how it plays out. It's looking pretty good. That's looking pretty darn good. And it's going to take another set of caching, but you can adjust it to something small like lit. And after we let it cache for a second, you'll notice the flicker has adjusted to the size of the text. And that's what we want. It's fully procedural. So now we're going to export this as a macro. I'm not going to get too in-depth on how to export a macro. Patrick Sterling, Jake Whipp, Casey Ferris, they've all got videos on exporting as macros. Go check them out. I will point out the two very important macros that we need to export whenever we send this to macro. So now we're going to send this off to macro. And we're going to do that first off by disconnecting this background image from our effect. And that's going to make the text disappear. It's okay. Don't panic. This is where we're going to be basically headed anyways. And now we're going to go ahead and get rid of this extraneous merge node. So what we're going to do, actually it's kind of important to note, so I'll just go ahead and mention this just for the sake of it. When you export a macro, all of the nodes, basically everything you see in the inspector, whenever you click on each individual node, when you export it as a macro, you can basically select what you want to show up in the inspector when you just select the macro itself. So if I wanted this text box in the inspector, which I do because I would want to be able to change the text as quickly as I can without going into the nodes and messing with everything. That's how you would indicate in the macro that you want it to show up. And I'll show you how to do that now. Usually when you're creating a macro, you would have to select each individual node in the order that you want it to appear just for organization purposes, but we're not going to worry about that here. We're just going to select everything, and we're going to right click. We're going to go to create macro. Now you can see there are a lot of options here, and that's only for our background node. So I'm going to minimize that. And these are all the nodes that we have in our macro. So these checkboxes will dictate whether or not they show up in the inspector when you export this as a macro. So I'm going to show you really quickly the two very important selections we need to make, and then I'm just going to blaze through and fast forward through all the rest, because whatever you want to be editable in the macro is completely up to you. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to our displace node, our displace one, and you can see that right here. We want to be able to port something into the macro using the displace 2 input. So this is displace 1. That's not what we want. We want displace 2. And we want to use this output. So here it is right here, output. Select that. Very important. And the second one is we want the output of this merge node to be what flows into the media out. Usually macros will all automatically have this set up for you, have the output set up for you, but just in case, it's very important to notice that you need to set an output as well. I just caught myself on a mistake. I don't want the output of the displace node, I want the input. So very important. So disregard what I said earlier. You want the input, the background input for the displace 2 node, not the output. The output is for the merge 1 node. So now we've got our input and we've got our output set. I'm going to go through and blaze through all the selections that we want to change. And so I'll be back with you in a second. Also, it bears mentioning, if you're confused on what you're actually looking for, if you hover over the field with your cursor in the bottom right, it will tell you right there. So I'm hovering over the font and I'm looking for fierytext.font. Okay, so I think I've got all my macros inspector tool set up. So I'm going to go ahead and change the macro name to something like hot text. Yeah, I'll just do hot text. There we go. And I will go to file and I will save as a group. You can save it as you can save as, and it will save it as just one node, but I like to save as a group in case I need to go back and then change things that I may have missed when programming the macro. So I'll save as group, and it will ask you where. So just save it to wherever you want. I'm going to save. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and then I'm going to open up where I saved it to, and here it is, hot text, and I'm going to just position and then drag it in here, and I'm going to drag it onto the main composition, and there we go. We've got our hot text. It's lit and it is oh so sexy. I mean, I can't really play it because of, caching purposes. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's the fiery text effect. It is worth mentioning that this is a setting file and it's a macro. So this is meant to be used in a Fusion composition. You can use it as a standalone Fusion comp or like on an adjustment layer, but since that would be transparent background data, you can put it over something, but you won't get that heat warble that you would unless you had background information going into it. So it's always best to have it just drag and dropped over a Fusion comp like this, so that way you get that full warble effect, but up to you. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed watching. Hope you guys learned a little something. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, just leave them down below. And if this was too far in the weeds for you and you want to just pick up the Gumroad file for a couple bucks, that link will be in the description as well. And that's going to do it for me. Till next time. See ya.